Hello, William Moore here, and you are now listening to the African Innovator podcast brought to you by AfriLabs, Africa's biggest business network. We're present in over 50 countries with plus 400 hubs and counting. And today we're going to talk about one of those hot topics on everybody's lips, yes, AI and data policy. This has been a big one. If you speak to anyone in the tech industry, this is, everyone has some kind of opinion on this. So let's just dive in and, hopefully this is sort of the start of this conversation and it will be carrying on, through our webinar and of course ultimately on our stage at the AfriLabs annual gathering, which takes place in November at Cape Town. But anyways, yes, let's just get into it. So what is this whole AI hoorah all about? I'm going to start with a saying that I think is a bit popular. And investors say this a lot. They say past performance is no guarantee for future performance. And we know this, but it is also the best way to predict the future. This is how, all systems that predict the future do. And with enough information and enough computing power, you could technically be pretty much able to tell the future, to predict time. That is the level of intelligence we are beginning to play with. And, to sort of give an example of how this level of intelligence works, even in social settings. During the pandemic, there was a list of countries, Nigeria being one of them, where these were countries that were tagged that that there would be uprisings, during the when you add the pressure of the pandemic with what they already had going on. Now, of course, this kind of level of data crunching, it's going to be taken to a whole new level when AI is out. So it's one of those things where we cannot even begin to imagine the gap that AI technology would put between regions that have it and regions that don't if it's not democratized as quickly as possible. But yeah, so big stuff here. Every this is why every government, every policymaker, everyone needs to pay attention to this. Now, when we think of data in in the sense of how it affects people on a daily basis, I would say you can divide this data into three main aspects. The first one, which is I guess the most obvious, is intellectual property. So this has to do with whether it's people's music, movies, books, whatever it is that is created by someone's mind. Basically, is their intellectual property. This is something that we're already seeing. Writers taking OpenAI to court saying our work was used to train the machine and we don't remember consenting to this. There's a whole they say, oh well, your work wasn't used, but people writing about your work was it's a whole long long issue. But the main point is we need to have a conversation as a society how intellectual property, which is needed to feed AI, is going to be sourced. And it's not a it's one of those things we can just make one statement for and it would cover everything. Because do we want a world that has very intelligent machinery that can maybe free us of some more menial tasks? I'm sure we all do, but at what cost? And at what cost to artists and other people that create intellectual property. This even goes to programmers as well, because your code, if you're not using something open source, is intellectual property as well. So it's a big thing to sort of think about how this is to be regulated. The second class of data would be personal data. So this can be sort of like medical records, travel history, data that is already, we already know this is sensitive data, but then when we're thinking of, okay, we want to train an AI in medical imaging, for radiology, or or CAT scan, stuff like that. Someone's actual CAT scans need to be used to train the machine on these. When we want to train machines on, if it has ABC symptoms, it's more likely to be XYZ. People's personal data needs to be used. And it's one of those things where, do we want a situation where we have AI helping us, for the next breakthrough in medicine, for spotting errors that humans might miss? Yeah, we would. So how do we get our hands on this data? What kind of policies? So, are we going to see that would allow, these companies get their hands on this data, but not jeopardize people's rights to privacy? Third is behavioral data. This we already see A lot on social media. Social media tracks this behavioral data heavily. That is why you get the suggestions that you get on your feed. That is why I believe the EU has sort of created this rule to sort of help reduce this tracking, where when you go to websites now, the first thing they ask you is if you want a cookie, obviously not a literal cookie, but cookie as a way to store packets of data based on your browsing habits on the platform. But yeah, so this is something that the EU is already very much aware about, and we've seen how this can be utilized in politics, for example, to sway voters. The famous Cambridge Analytica story comes to mind. And imagine supercharging this with AI. Imagine, you're getting ads that are tailored to be changing on the spot as your opinions are changing. Like this is just sort of like a next level of what we're already experiencing in a very big and real way. So when we talk about data, I'm just going to take you through sort of like a little chain of, a little privacy chain basically that your data has to go through. And as we're going through this, we'll talk through some of the policies that we might be able to jump in here and there. So at first is collection. Who has the right to collect? One of the things crypto companies, pride themselves about is that we don't even store your data. We don't even collect it in the first place. And it's sort of to create this idea that, you own all your data and no one is, like, yeah, it's all yours. So you have platforms that do not collect data. Obviously, platforms that do not collect data would not work very well for the AI industry because the data is needed. But there has to be rules, So if a platform is collecting the data, which takes us to the next one, there has to be rules about how it's stored. It has to be stored in a safe place. We're going to get to this a bit later in the presentation, but there's also the question of data centers. I think by 2025, I believe, or 2030, somewhere around that mark. It's the data center business in Africa is projected to be hitting, I believe, $3 billion. This is not even scratching the surface. Like this is, you have countries that are already well into having, like America, for example, has over 5,000 data centers. I mean, they are like easily the world's super leader in that space. The second is, I believe, Germany, that has 521,000. So yeah, that just sort of gives you an idea of how many data centers are in this place. We're not even, there's not enough data center to hold all the data we need. And speaking of this, this data center business as well, it's very important to note that data centers are heavily reliant on energy. And with sort of the push for clean energy and with AI coming up, OpenAI, for example, is apparently burning through the equivalent of what it takes to power 17,000 houses every day. That is how much energy it consumes just crunching its data. So storage, very important. Are there going to be certain kinds of information that you are only allowed to store in country? If you want this here, come and build your data center here when you can store this in country or in continent. Do we need to think about this AI policy in more of, let's say, less of a country by country base and more of a continental base? These are also things we need to think about. And so, okay, let's say you are allowed to collect data and you follow the rules and you're allowed to store it, right? When you store it, are you allowed to transfer? When it comes to transferring data, currently what is done a lot of the time is data is anonymized. Is that the right word? It's all made to appear, anonymous. And then you can sort of transfer it. So, they've removed everything that could be used to technically identify a person, and then you can transfer it. And this is sort of like I guess the popular practice now to help protect data. Moving forward, normally we'd say, oh, if I give you this data, if it's transferred to you, you can use it to, I don't know, maybe figure out things like polls and stuff like that. But then if the data becomes, like you're giving my status, even if you don't give my name or or anything that can identify me, just giving out things that I've created to be used in this way of training the machine is something that we would have to talk about. I believe Facebook has already announced that they're going to be scraping all the content on all their platform. This is pretty a big deal now in the art world. You have uh, alternative platforms like I believe it's called Kara opening up, promising that they're not going to scrape your data. In fact, there's even a software called Glaze that is supposed to you're supposed to process your content to protect it from AI scraping. So it sort of poisons the AI when it tries to scrape it. So this is really where we are with this whole AI business. And last but not least, processing. And this processing, it's whether you're processing it to be used for ads or you're processing it to be used to train an AI. Who has the right to process this data? Just because you can collect my data, store my data, even transfer it to someone else. When it comes to the processing, in whatever way that this data is going to be processed, who decides when, oh, this is not the kind of, we don't want this processed in this way, or okay, we're cool with this being processed in this way. So these are just, some of the things we have to start thinking about when we approach the whole notion um, of policy regarding data. And as it is, quite unfortunately, the continent remains a bit disconnected from the conversations because, for example, Facebook, which, so many billions of Africans use, is not domestic to the continent, But of course, the way the EU put forward their laws that, you have to, a website would have to request, for example, that, um, that it stores your cookies. So even if we don't have direct control, we can't summon Mark Zuckerberg to the Senate in the way they can summon him in America, for example. But locally, we still have to be invested in, ways that we can shape our policies. And this is just a matter of dialoguing with these companies, And so, yeah, as it stands, these are some of the stakeholders I think that are important in the conversation. The most basic one is just the state protection via IP and data laws. These laws already exist. You just have to include the scope of AI. I would say most of these departments, they need sort of like an AI AI philosopher, if you will, that would help explain. Okay, look, this is what is happening in the industry. This is where it's going. So the laws are adapted to the future that we're coming into. Institutional code of conduct for best practices. This is amongst the companies that work in this space. Um, Recently there was a lot of hoorah about the actress's voice. I'm trying to remember her name now. So the Scarlett Johansson from the movie Her, whose voice was sort of used as the OpenAI's assistant voice, and she's taking them to court saying that she didn't approve of this, and stuff like that. When a company that big is setting that kind of standard, it's a conversation that we need to start having now. That okay, there needs to be some kind of code of conduct. No one is against people building out with AI or experimenting, but we need these practices. For example, we need AI companies to pledge that all their engines would have some kind of tag, so we would be able to check if this was made by AI or human made. So this would help things like counterfeiting in the future, or even like students cheating in exams, stuff like that. And last but not least, international agreements for global balance. So this is sort of, we as a globe, this is just beyond the continent now. We need to have that conversation to know that okay, um, this is where our continent is. This is where yours is at the moment. So we might not have sort of like a one size fit all. You know, we might need, for example, we might need cheaper AI access in Africa because we're not running on the dollar. So if the price is standard across board, it means people in places where they have higher spending power would be able to leverage AI way more than people in places where they have lower spending power. So this is just some of the conversations I think need to be opening on a global scale. Yes, that was what I was waffling about before. Africa is home to over, this is the continent, not a country, over 100. And like I said, for context, Germany alone has about 500. And that's just a country. The whole continent of Africa has just about 100. And yeah, South Africa, Nigeria, and Kenya leading this space. Projections are 2028. We should be worth about 12 billion. Sorry, sure, we should put about three billion, growing by 12% pretty much every year. So I'm looking forward to that. And that will be by 2028. Please, if you've enjoyed this, do not forget the AAG is literally at, it's just 5th of November. It's just by the corner. You can go start grabbing your tickets now. Um, we're going to be having conversations like this. We're going to be having stakeholders from pretty much every sector, everywhere. If you want to sort of start speaking to people even before the conference, you can join Africa Connect. It's our online platform. And if you're working on AI, we want to feature you in the Tibetana magazine, our annual publication. Definitely reach out. We are more than happy, to spotlight what you're doing, spotlight, your CEO, see what problems you're solving. We really want to help amplify this space on the continent. And that's it. Thank you for listening. Feel free to share with your friends, comment, like, follow, the deal. And until next time, we'll hear more. Stay tuned.